Okay, guys, thank you very much for coming and welcome to the weekly Trader Vision workshop. I just noticed that I've got a typo. I have not been promoted to the Feb, so this is a February 7th, 2018 Trader Vision workshop, part of the weekly workshop series. Forgive me if things are crazy a little bit tonight because, as some of you know, Windows just did an update on me, forced it upon me about 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, something, and my monitors are all now the wrong resolution. My mouse is acting a little bit funky, and everything looks just a little bit surreal because I'm used to seeing the high resolution. Tonight, or this afternoon, what we're going to cover is validating and planning trades, because those are really part of the very similar, or not the same, but they're very close to the same process. So we'll do some examples of that, and after that we'll do Q&A. Yeah, Rick, I understand. I know very well how to work with computers. The resolutions are not there. There is one resolution available to me. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm just going to work through some examples. If you guys have some other tickers you want to look at, you can throw them out later. But I'm going to go through the process of planning or validating and planning a trade. So let's just look at this TCAP, Triangle Capital. This is something been talked about in the trading room, and I think it's a good place to start. So the first thing that I do on any trade is try to drop into some support and resistance lines. That certainly looks like a level in there. I don't know, someplace. Someplace in there looks certainly true. Probably another one right along in here. Let's go back to a daily and see what that does for us. We'll probably want to do another one here on filling the gap. So that's good enough for now. I'll drop in a trend line just so that I'm comfortable that we're above trend. Let's say something like that. Good enough. That gets us in the ballpark. So we have broken the downtrend. We've got a nice base here. We've got low, high, higher low, working on the higher high, and that 1080 area looks like it's been resistance, and that is probably what we'll be looking at in terms of a breakout level. So let's just drop in a long line and say I would be looking for a breakout retest to prove that that's support. I would be wanting to put my stop in someplace tight below that. My first target would be out here, and my second target would be up in here, and that's probably going to be about where the 200-day moving average is as this RBB gets up there. So let's just work with that to start with. First of all, in Trader Vision, and let me know if you guys can see this. Again, the resolution is funky, so I've gone ahead and made this full screen. Okay. So let's put in that ticker first. And I'm only willing to risk 200 bucks. The first thing I want to look up is the earnings date, and I see that I've got that, and that's going to be about 228. Why is it not taking this? Lovely. Great. My display is screwed up as well. Interesting. Well, at least we got today's candles. So let's go through and validate the trade. First of all, even though we like the chart, I noticed that I've got 3 bullish and 3 bearish indications. The overall market, and I believe this one for this account, is the SPY. So the long-term trend of the SPY is up, short-term trend of the SPY is down. The long-term trend of TCAP is down, which would be expected in a rounded bottom breakout. But the short-term trend is also down. Again, those are bearish indications. We do have the T-line or 8 EMA above the 34 EMA, so that's a good thing. We have enough liquidity for me, again, that for now this is set to my personal approach to liquidity, which is the last price times the 3-month or 63-day moving average of volume. We've got no candle signals per se, but you can see we have been in that downtrend and we haven't broken back above that downtrend. We do have the rounded bottom breakout, we do have a pullback opportunity, and we're working on higher highs and higher lows. So those are all good things for us. Let's open up a trade here and go back to that chart. We were looking at, let's call it a 1085 entry with, what's the V-stop tell us? V-stop tells us at 1028, which is right where my mouse is where we should be. But on a breakout and pullback, that's going to be higher. I'm going to say it's right in below these lows. So let's call that 1050. So we're looking at a 1080 entry, a 1050 stop, and a 1220 first target, and a 1310 second target. Let's see if I can remember those numbers. So we're looking at a 1285 entry, a 1250 stop, what did I say? That was 1080 and 1050, 1220 and 1310. Okay. Let's go ahead and say that we can do let's just, for argument's sake, with this size account, do 200 shares. Something is screwy again with this Windows update. My computer's not working correctly. That's about 4% of the account, but let's say that I can live with that. So let's look at what 100 and 100 split of stocks does for us. It shows us that yes, we're a little bit large on the entry. We've got about $21.75 entry cost. If we were stopped out, let's try that again. Much better. If we're stopped out, we're going to lose 80 bucks, $79.90. If we do make both targets, we're going to get $405 in profit. So that's going to give us a little over 5-to-1 risk reward, which is awesome. But let's just see what that does for us. If we had a trade goal that's given us $187 at the first target, let's say that our trade goal was, I don't know, 2.25. So what can we do to change that? Let's drop this down to 75 and take this up to 125. See if that allows us to take our goal off the table better or quicker, and it does. If we were to set this arrangement, we give up just a little bit on the top end. So now we're just under $400, $397 overall target profit. However, we're getting that 235 off the table at that first target. So if price only gets to this first target, fills the gap, we've made our goal for the trade, and we are on track for our long-term account goals. So that's something I'm going to want to do. I'm going to want to take that 235 off as quickly as I can, and I've still got about a 5-to-1 reward to risk ratio. The way I have it set up is to consider all goals or all target exits, and in this case there are 2 exits versus what happens if I'm stopped out. Even if I decided that this stop is a little too tight, even if I drop that down 20 cents, I still have, like 3 1/3 to 1. I'm only risking $120 if I'm stopped out. I still have about that $400 total reward, and I can still get my goal off the table here at the first target. So even if I want to be a little more conservative at first and give it a little room to work, and then just quickly move that stop up as the trade works in my favor, I can do that. That's basically the process that you go through to validate a trade and plan a trade, and then work with the scenarios within the trade. The target levels and stop and entry are all set on what is realistic, what is logical from the chart, based on support and resistance and the patterns and the signals that we're seeing. We might call that a hammer today. But by the same token, then we were playing with the numbers, working with different scenarios to see if we can achieve our goal as quickly as possible while still having a good overall long-term trade. So this one, let's go back here. Assuming that we break out and retest, this one would be a very nice trade, and I would put TCAP. I've had it on my list, but put that on your list. I know it's been talked about in the trading room. Rick talked about it today as well. Let's look at another one here. I think BTU is something that Doug might have mentioned today. Odd. I know BTU is a long-term stock. I'm not sure why we don't have much in the way of data. Not sure what's going on there. But BTU's been a stock forever, and Peabody's been around forever. We can see that that's been a resistance level there. Because I know we only have a 50 going back here, there's no sense going to the weekly. There's just not going to be any data to look at. I would say that someplace in there, is potential support. We've got a little bit of resistance it acted as there, and it's been support across here to some extent. The V-stop says that we're looking at 38.80, which would be right in here. So basically just a touch lower than what I drew. But let's work with my number for now. Let's draw in some fibs because we're at all-time highs and we need some targets. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's draw it there for now. 34. Okay, that's going to work. So that's the correct drawing. And if we use those as our targets, we would put an entry up here. Again, I like the same pattern. Whether I'm looking at a pullback or at a breakout, I want to see a retest to prove that that is support. And I want to buy on the bounce there. Let's just say that something like that is where we're going to put our stop. Again, as we pull up and pull back, that V-stop's going to come up a little bit. Let's add in a couple more targets. I like to use the 38.2, and you ask, why is that? Well, I had a 23.6% retracement. And if I use 38.2, somebody that's a math wizard, add those two together, what you'll come up with is 61.8, and that's a fib number. Okay, it was a bankruptcy. Okay, yeah. Coal is not one of your better businesses. So out here, I'm just using the basic trend that we've had. So that's what I would be looking at in terms of an entry. Let's drop it in as green. So let's put some numbers on this. Let's say that I want my stop about 39.75. I want my, let's see if I can do this. Let's close this. BTU. Let's go ahead and shrink this down. Maybe that'll work. Okay, BTU, again, we're going to risk 200 bucks. We're going to assume that I've already set goals and they're set for 2.25, let's call it. Looks like BTU earnings are today. So they reported this morning, apparently, or at least that's what NASDAQ is saying. That's okay. It didn't do anything crazy. We did a little bit of sideways action there as they reported. So we're past that. That's good enough. Let's go ahead and use 3 entries here. See if that helps us. So we've got we've got earnings out of the way. We've got 3 bullish indications and 2 bearish. The overall market, long-term trending up, short-term trending down. The ticker itself, long-term trending up, short-term has been trending down. And then the T-line is above the 34 EMA, got plenty of liquidity, and we've got no real candle signals and not much in terms of patterns because of the reorg, it's not looking at historical data. So let's say that our entry is about 41, let's call it 41.30. Our stop is about 39.75. Our first target up here is at 44.80. Our second target is up there about 47.25. And our third target, if we were to get there, is about 51. Let's just call it in a dime. See what that does for us. It says we can buy 122 shares. I know with this account size that's going to be way too much. Let's try 60 shares. That might be too much even. Yeah, it's still almost 5% of the account, but for now, let's just do that so that I can play with some numbers. I would not do that in a normal trade, but for demonstration purposes, it allows me to play with some numbers. CB, I'm not sure what you mean. Nonsense to get here. Are you talking about the room? Is there some problem with the room? At the very least, I am recording, so you will get this. I will post it on the web page. So let's validate things here. We're kind of three bullish, 2 bearish, and a couple push. We've got no candle signal. We've got no data. I'm going to look past that because my signal is really going to be breaking out, retesting to prove support. So that's going to be my signal for entry, my trigger. And I would say that this is really a consolidation breakout. So that's going to be close enough to a pattern for me. If I were to do an even split across the 3 exits, what I would see is that we're risking $103 if I'm stopped out, looking at a reward of $365, but I'm only picking up about $63 at that first target, which is not much. So let's see if we can't play with these numbers. Let's drop this down to 10 and drop this down to 10 and take that up to 40. What does that do for us? That gives us $131, 132, but that's still not much of a gain. It reduces our overall reward to risk down to a little under 3 to 1, which is still acceptable, but I'm still not getting close to that 2 1/4 that I want to try to put in the bank. And you can see that that's it's going to be problematic because the trade's only going to generate, you know, $280 basically. But let's drop this down to 5 and this down to 5, knock this up to 50. Is that going to work? Still not going to get me there. So let's see if I can make it at all. If I did all my shares, I'm still only going to make $200. If my target was only to make $200 for the trade, I would consider this. Probably going to pass on the trade because it's not a great setup overall. It doesn't have a lot of bullish trading rules going for it. And at some point, we are going to rename this section of TraderVision trading rules. I want to wait until I make this more customizable for you so that you can set your own trading rules before I do that. But basically, it's looking at what are my trading rules? Do I have them in my favor, or do I have to violate some of my trading rules to get into the trade? In this case, even if I took it all off at the first target, and even if I traded almost 5% of my account in one trade, I'm still only making $200, and I have less than a 2 to 1 reward to risk ratio. What that tells me is this trade does not validate, and there's no way for me to plan it to make it validate where I can reach my goals. So I'm going to pass on that trade. Let's look at another one. Do any of you have a ticker that you're interested in looking at? Otherwise, I'll just go to some of these others that were either been on my list or were talked about in the room today. But if anybody has a ticker they want us to look at, I'll be happy to plan it out and validate it and show you how I look at it with TraderVision. Doesn't look like anybody's typing, so I'll move right along. So let's look at, Joan wants to look at Microsoft. Okay. If I can get my mouse to move over here. Okay, Microsoft. Massive long-term uptrend. Something like that. Little pullback here. Little, I say. At one point it was a almost 13% pullback. Let's drop in some support and resistance. Looks like there's some resistance right in there. Looks like we had some resistance in there, and that might be support for us now. It is resistance. Let's drop out to a weekly chart and see if we can pick up anything. We're at all-time highs, so not really. Let's go back to the daily. That being the case, let's see if we can't drop in some fibs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's going to be down there. So this is what our targets are going to look like. And again, in this case, I'm probably personally, this has violated my rule. We had a pullback that was down here about probably close to 76%, certainly more than 50%, and you could say that it held on a closing basis or an opening basis, the 61.8, but that's probably too much of a pullback for me to trade. What I would probably be looking for personally would be a breakout when it gets back into the trend. And let's just say that I could buy in there. And at that point, it has retested and proven that support, so I can put my stop tucked up pretty close underneath that 95.10 level. And I'm going to use fibs because we're at all-time highs. I have nothing else to really work off of. There's your 38.2. There's your 61.8, and that's about as much as I'm going to do. If it was a longer term hold, I guess we could drop in the 100% as well. But we're just looking for that trend to continue. Let's color this so we know that that's the entry. Does that look like a reasonable trade plan here? We've got a long-term trend. We've had a pullback. It was pretty sharp. The sharpest one we've had certainly in the last year and a half, probably longer. But we can, if we get a breakout here, we had a bullish engulfing yesterday, and we got some profit taking just below this potential resistance here today. If we were to keep going, there's no sense in my mind trying to get in here. I've only got 4% up into resistance, so I'm going to wait for it to get back in the trend, break out, retest, and prove to me that it's back ready to roll. Let's see what we can plan with Trader Vision here. So MSFT, $200. Okay, so we've got earnings out of the way, end of January. We don't have to worry about that. We've got 4 bullish factors and 2 bearish factors. Pretty much the same ones as before. Long-term market bias is up, short-term market bias is down. Microsoft is long-term trending up, short-term it's been trending down. The T-line is above the 34 EMA. Got no candle signals today. Yesterday was that bullish engulfing. And we're working on something that could be called a triangle of sorts. I'm not real thrilled with that definition, but we're working certainly on a pullback opportunity at any rate. But I'm looking for an entry up here. Let's just do, for argument's sake, do a couple of entry or a couple of targets. If we were to buy in about, let's just call it 97.03 with a stop down here. Let's call it 95. Let's be tight. And our first target is up here. 102.25. And our second target is up here, 111.40. Is that right? 105.75. I'm sorry. Says we can do 93 shares and stay less than $200 risk. I know that's way too much for this small account. I need to really increase the account size for demonstrations, but let's try 50 shares. still way too much of this account. For argument's sake, let's say we have a bigger account and that's not almost 10% of the account. If we break it out equally, what does that do for us? Well, if we break it out equally at those two targets, fibs just staying within the trend, we're looking at 5% gain just over it at the first target, about 8 2/3 at the second target. We're risking 111 to make 333, which gives us 3-1. So that's good, but we have to make that second goal to get our profit. Let's see what happens if I play with it this way. Make that 10 shares at the longer term goal and make this 40 shares here. That gets me real close to 200. If I want to get to that, two and a quarter, I've got to do 45 and 5. So I'm only really looking to make that a reasonable trade by doing this. So unless we're doing this as an option trade, which probably could, certainly have the volume to have open interest for Microsoft. But since TraderVision is not options enabled at the moment, I'm not going to look up the chains on that. But theoretically, I could play with this and come up with it if I'm willing to do that. I still have a good enough reward to risk. I still have the ability to pick up my goal at my very first target, and I have a teeny bit that rides for a bigger run. So for a short-term trade, for a swing trade, this probably is not going to cut it. But if this is a longer-term trade, we can set these goals much higher. We can say, well, in the longer term, I'm not looking to take profits here. In the longer term, I'd probably manage it off the weekly chart and set my goals much higher. So we could make this work as a longer term trade, as might be what you would expect with a blue blood like Microsoft that is just slow and trending. So that's what the trade plan would look like for Microsoft. Rick, you wanted to look at Twitter. Let's see what we can find. Okay. Well, there's our trend. Something like that. And it looks like a trend channel to me. Looks like, I don't think there's going to be, well, maybe there is. This is the weekly chart. Yeah, someplace in there, in that general area around 31 bucks, give or take, is probably going to be some resistance. Again, up here about 34.65 or so, and probably up here. Let's just drop a line in here and see where we get some touches. Probably right along in there, just under 40 bucks. So let's go back to the daily. Scroll down so that we can see that, and we've got a J hook here, so we can set up our fibs. You notice how the 61.8 is up close to this line at 31 bucks, so that's probably going to be a very good place to put a target. How soon is another question. Let's just split the difference between those two. At this point, this potentially is resistance, so we're going to wait for a breakout and a retest. Certainly I am. There's no sense saving that, trying to make that 1.5%. I'd rather have the confirmation that we broke it out and held. We're back in this trend, rather than potentially seeing this fail, in which case you would be setting up an M pattern here. So that's what I think about the chart. Let's just use that one target for now. This was a pretty severe pullback, touched the 61.8. Again, that doesn't throw me, but on a breakout retest, I can forgive the previous longer pullback. Let's go ahead and look at Trader Vision. TWTR. Much better trade in terms of our trading rules here. The market, same as before. Long-term trending up, short-term trending down. The symbol itself, both long and short terms, are uptrends. We have the T-line above the 34 EMA, plenty of liquidity, and I would almost call that, not quite, but kind of a double morning star, if you will. It's not a classic signal. It's not something you'll find in the book, but we had a strong down day. We gapped down and had 2 days of indecision, which means there was a lot of wick there. And then we gapped up and had a strong day again, closed up above this first down candle. So I could call that a double morning star. Let's just do one entry and one exit. Whoops, I forgot to look up the earnings. TWTR. Well, okay. This one's out because earnings are tomorrow. So this is not a trade that we would have entered today. Possibly tomorrow if we do break out and then retest either tomorrow or Friday, I guess. That would be a good one, or maybe Monday. But let's just say that we're going to look at an entry of about the V-stop hasn't even flipped yet. But let's just say that we can get over here and we'll put our V-stop, or put our stop here at the 23.6. So we've got an entry up here about 27.50. We've got a stop down here about 26.15, let's call it. Whoops, let's try that again, 26.15. And we've got a first target up there around 30.85-ish. Says we can do 140 shares. I think that's going to be too many. Let's just do 100. Still going to give us over 5% of this small account, but let's just say that we could do that. And taking all 100 shares there at our one target, what does that do for us? Well, in this case, we're risking 145 bucks to make 3 1/4. So we're getting about 2 1/4 to 1. And we are able to get our goal off of the trade at this first target, our only target, and therefore it is a valid trade. You may not like this trade as well as some other charts you see, but at that first target, if that's a reasonable target, based on support and resistance and the fibs, it is, then this is a doable trade, because I can get my trade goal off the table in one fell swoop, and I have a good reward to risk, and I have the trends working in my favor. So that makes this a very attractive trade, which you may not normally think. So that's how I validated the trade, makes my trade rules. Again, we wouldn't do it because of earnings tomorrow, but after the breakout on earnings, hopefully, and then a retest, that would be a good trade to get into, just expecting this trend to continue. Any questions about that? Okay, I see we got some questions, and so let's see what I can do for you. Okay, at the moment, and this is again, this is acting a little bit wonky on me today, I think because of the update. It just went crazy. At the moment, what you have to do is move it to a watch list. So what I did is I right-clicked on the chart, and I moved that to a watch list. And over here, I open it as a new trade. In the next version that will be released here soon, you'll be able to right-click from the chart and either move it to a watch list or open a trade for it. In either case, that will work for you. So that's how you go about that. So at the moment, it's a two-step process, and you'll have to decide for yourself whether it's just faster to go to trade log and type in MSFT or do it through the watch list. We're changing the data source here as well. So we've got some very cool things coming here. We're going to have a whole bunch of, I found a new data source, and we're going to have a whole bunch of information that you can customize, what fields you want to see, and so forth for your watch list tickers. You can now save these. Let's just call this one high tech. So that's now a watch list named high tech, and I can close and reopen my watch list, and when I go to high tech, it opens up that watch list. So you can have as many watch lists as you want. If you decide you don't want a watch list, you just delete it. You can rename them and so forth. A lot of very cool things, very, very close on the horizon. Do we have any other questions? Okay, well, it's just about 5 o'clock, so I'm going to stop the recording, but I will hang around and do a few more charts for you just so you have some more examples here.